And I get a call from the office manager, as you referenced, and she said, "Hey, John, are you coming into the specialty pharmacy clean today?" But then she tells me that they smell like they just smoked weed. And it meant that I would need to go fire them and then go down from 5 employees to 1 employee in the span of 4 days. And so it just, it meant that I was going to be doing nights like I had done the night before, where I'm out until 3, 4 in the morning and then up at the crack of dawn for the foreseeable future. And I just lost my mind, just screaming in the car by myself.
If you have ever looked around at your life and thought, this can't be it, you are in the right place. This is Flying Upstream, the podcast for people who refuse to live on autopilot. I'm your host, Krystin Medeiros. Each week, I sit down with people who questioned the rules, challenged the expectations, and chose a different path. Not because it was easy, but because it was honest. We talk about the moments that broke them open, the decisions that scared them, and the lives they built when they stopped doing what they were told and started listening to themselves. If you are done following the crowd and ready to trust your own way forward, stay with me. Let's fly upstream. Hey, free spirits. Today I've got an incredible guest for you, John Borden. On the outside, he was doing everything right. Good job, responsible adult, climbing the ladder. On the inside, he was blackout drinking multiple times a week, spending hundreds on coke, chasing cheap dopamine, and quietly spiraling. A breaking point at the gym, a stranger at a bar calling out his victim mindset, and eventually an international experience with psilocybin mushrooms completely reset his values and the trajectory of his life. Today, he is a 100-mile ultra marathon finisher, strongman competitor, author, and founder of Get Psyched Fitness. John, welcome to the show.
Kristen, great to be here. Happy to talk with you.
Awesome. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. You said you did all the right things growing up. When did that first feel like something wasn't quite lining up internally for you?
Well, that's a great question, and probably the first time anyone's ever asked me that specifically. But here's the thing, right? I was doing everything that I should have been doing, right? They tell you get good grades, work hard, go to college, yada, yada, yada. When I was looking at colleges, I was torn on where to go because I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And that really should have been the huge indicator of getting off that track and not following what my parents or society was telling me to do. But I was a good little soldier and continued to put my head down and follow what path others wanted for me. And, there's so much growing up that was done between then and actually figuring out what I wanted to do with my life, which wasn't until I was 30. But yeah, that's where stuff probably really started to go awry was when I didn't take autonomy for myself at that age, at 18, to say, hey, I don't want to go to college. I don't want to, you know, take out loans and follow this path just because it's what I'm supposed to be doing. And, if I had taken a step back, a gap year, whatever, and analyzed myself, learned more about the world, maybe, things would have gone a little bit different direction. But we don't get to play that game. You get the cards that you're dealt, and everything's gravy now.
Yeah. So, what did your life actually look like in your 20s when the drinking, coke, gambling, porn, all of that were at their peak?
I went to college, I did have a desire to go to college, right? But the desire was more so on the growing up that would go on while I was there. The partying was a big part of it, just the social aspect of it, and really feeling like I was away from home for the first time in my life and free to experience life without my parents looking over my shoulder. So coming out of college, I still had that I don't really know what I want to do with my life, but I found a job with Enterprise Rent a Car that allowed me to sink my teeth into it to get ranked against my, I was going to say opponents, but fellow coworkers on a monthly basis to see who ranks at the top. And so I did that for 3.5 years and was the top performer basically every month until I got fired. And so, at that time, I was a branch manager of a 200 car branch, responsible for multi-million dollars worth in assets. I had a girlfriend that I had been dating for, 4 years at that time. I had a great group of friends and had every metric of success that you could ask for as a 25-year-old. When I was a manager of a car rental branch before, I would have been able to rent the cars myself that I was renting out. So by all accounts, I was killing it. But I didn't really have a direction on what mattered to me and what I wanted in life, and ended up getting fired from that job after my office was broken into and robbed while I was sitting at home on the couch. And I didn't really understand why I was at fault for that, and that resentment followed me for a number of years. But yeah, I thought I had everything on lock, and then, just like a slight wind coming over and blowing down a house of cards, everything started to topple, and it was just a spiral from that break-in till reach that breaking point that you mentioned earlier at the gym. Fast forward a number of years from that point, but, a number of years of drinking to blackout, a number of years of using cocaine every opportunity that I had, chasing tail, and, really my only value being wanting to have fun. And, thankfully, a little bit of sense came through to stop that and get myself in a positive direction. But, it was a long road of self-destruction in the meantime.
So take us to that afternoon at the gym, 'cause this is a pretty big turning point for you. So what happened when your manager called you? And was that the first time that you thought, I can't keep living like this?
Yeah, well, so, what happened at that point? So, this is 2021, and I had moved from New Jersey, where I grew up and where I went to college and where all of my life is, to Connecticut, about 3 hours away from where I was living. And, so I move up there and I'm away from all my friends, all my family. The only thing that I'm doing is working and then drinking and playing video games, basically, right? And so I was working for my family's company at this point and was saddled with a great deal of responsibility where, the employees, uh, you know, weren't reliable and wouldn't show up. And so me being the manager would have to step in and do their duties. And it made hiring very difficult that we were in the middle of COVID, and we had to let go of two employees who weren't vaccinated. So at the start of the week, we had to let go of two employees who weren't vaccinated because mandates just went into effect. So my one region is down from 5 employees to three. Then there was a specialty pharmacy clean that Thursday at 2 o'clock. Thursday at 2:05, I'm at the gym. I have, 2 hours of sleep on me at that point because I was out until 4 a.m. covering those two employees I had to let go of. And I get a call from the office manager, as you referenced, and she said, "Hey, John, are you coming into the specialty pharmacy clean today?" No, I wasn't planning on it. Why? I literally had no idea what she would say. I thought she was just concerned the employees wouldn't show up. But then she tells me that they smell like they just smoked weed. And this is a sterile environment. It's the only time during the week where I have employees that are present while the, office, the, you know, office staff, hospital staff is still in the office. And it meant that I would need to go fire them and then go down from 5 employees to one employee in the span of 4 days. And so it just, it meant that I was going to be doing nights like I had done the night before, where I'm out until 3, 4 in the morning and then up at the crack of dawn for the foreseeable future. And I just lost my mind, just screaming in the car by myself, well, with my mom on the other line, just screaming, "Ah." And, it just was this huge moment where, you don't like to do that. You don't like to have emotion overpower you like that, but it just highlighted the fact that I was so frustrated with so many things in my life, whether it was, being away from friends and family, whether it was doing a job that demanded so much out of me. Just the fact that I didn't feel like I had value and I didn't feel like I was making a difference to anyone. And so all of this like frustration, all this effort that I'm putting forth to work, 16-hour days and not give myself sleep and yada, yada, yada. And it was just like one thing after the other that I felt like I couldn't control. That was the breaking point I needed.
Well, I want to make a pause here because I think there are so many people out there who feel that way. They are covering for coworkers or direct reports who are not pulling their weight for whatever reason. They're working 20-hour days, 16-hour days, way, way more than is healthy, let alone what they're actually getting paid for, most likely. And most people are on the edge of that breaking point all the time. It's just the state they are living in for so long, and then it takes just one little nudge to really push people over the edge. And from an outsider looking in, you might think, wow, that person really lost it. They went off the deep end. But the reality is they were living right there for so long and you just didn't know it because they did such a good job covering it up. And just kind of putting that out there because I know I've been in that place before and I've had many friends be in that place before too. And it's actually so common. So even though in your story this was a huge game changer for you and it ended up being a positive thing to put you on the path that was right for you, in the moment it feels like a bad thing, like it feels bad, right? And it's so hard to kind of reconcile the outside, which is that you're putting tons of effort in, hours, and trying to make it work, trying to impress people, get paid. But then on the inside, you're just like, I literally can't handle this. You're so far past your capacity at that point.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was actually just talking with one of my clients yesterday who's a physical therapy aide and is just hyper frustrated because, he was saying he saw 14 clients yesterday and it's back to back to back to back. And, he doesn't have enough time to really pay attention to one client. And, it's stuff that requires him to be hands on, right? It's physical therapy. And so, he was just saying that, he's crying on his way to work yesterday. And I've been there, obviously, right? I've felt that, right? That frustration that it feels like you're doing everything that's asked of you and it's still not turning out the way that you want it to turn out. And, when I had that breaking point, it didn't immediately take hold to me, exactly how much control over my life I actually had. But that was one of those, like, okay, I'm putting my foot down. I need to do stuff for me right now. And, I was working for my family's company. And I felt an obligation to do that and do them proud and to, be the face of the company on the outside, client facing. And, in that moment, I just realized that I couldn't continue to do that for my own sake anymore. And I had to say, okay, I need to find something different. And so I
Yeah.
spent like 3 months trying to find something different. And, at the time, different was just a different sales job in Connecticut that would, at least get me interacting with a different type of clientele or something like that. And then, the conversation with the stranger at the bar that you referenced before happened. And
Yes. I want to, yeah, focus on that for a minute because this is another interesting point where in the moment seemed like nothing, just chatting with a stranger, but actually really changed your mindset. So tell us about that.
yeah, completely. I sat down next to this guy and he's got a great energy about him. He's talking to the bartender, he's talking to a guy to his right, and I'm to his left. And, we just start chatting and we find out that we've got so much in common. We were both fraternity presidents, we were both baseball players in our younger years. We both started with a company right out of college and skyrocketed through the ranks. Difference was he was still there when I got fired from Enterprise. And, you know, I shared all of these things with him. My girlfriend of 4.5 years that left me a couple of years prior, and he said what nobody else in my life had ever had either the courage or the awareness to say to me. And that's not, dude, fuck Enterprise. Fuck that girl. You'll find a girl. No, it's this is all your fault. And nothing's going to change for you until you take ownership. And I wanted to tell him to fuck himself, but really made me sit and reflect and say, fuck, he's right. I can't blame anyone except for myself. And so that was a huge turning point because, it was no longer, okay, I'm in Connecticut because my family's company needs help up here and I need to be up here. I'm no longer, stuck in Connecticut because I signed a lease. No, I can go where I want. I can find a job that's a work from home and figure out where the hell I want to go. And
So in this conversation with a stranger, he kind of calls you out
Mhm.
and you realize he's actually right. And I mean, that's a huge realization. So, what shifted for you inside when you realized that you actually have autonomy over your life? You actually can do whatever you want.
Mhm. Well, it was a gradual process, right? It's not like it was a switch flip, but I realized that I could change where I lived. And that was the first thing that, rang true is that I don't need to look for a job here in Connecticut. I can find a work from home and I can go elsewhere. And so that was the first thing that I said, okay, bang, this is a total dichotomy shift where I'm not stuck here just because I've committed to something, right? I had this ingrained belief, from a kid and from my father. And, thank you to him for putting this into me because it served me very well in a number of fronts. But that when you start something, you finish it, period. Right. And until the job's done, until you've done what you said you're going to do, there's no quitting, there's no stopping. And I wasn't at that place yet, right? I was still I committed to helping my family with this adoption of this account up in New England, and I'm here to see it through to the end. But after having that conversation and recognizing, that I wasn't stuck in the job, I wasn't stuck in the lease, even though I had, 6 more months on the apartment lease that I signed, that I could make a change for myself that I knew would be better in the long run. And so, that started that taking hold of my life phase. And, it slowly trickled, slowly trickled into a number of months later when I had, the experience that I wrote my book about.
Yes, I mean, really incredible. And I want to also appreciate that you said it wasn't an instant switch flip, right? It actually was sort of tiny moments over time, tiny realizations that led up to that. And I think most people look at somebody like you, for example, and they say, wow, he had one kind of lifestyle, was drinking and drugs and all this stuff, that kind of bad vices, if you will. And then, before you know it, now he's this incredible runner, he's an author doing all these incredible things. It's easy to look at somebody like you and say, oh, he just changed his life. It was just that easy. But the reality is that it's actually a lot of tiny moments over time that help you build confidence to take a new path, to learn what to do, to realize what feels good inside and how that can manifest on the outside. And so it really is kind of these moments over time, and it's not always just one moment that truly changes it, even though there might have been a significant catalyst to it. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, completely. I mean, with anything, there's going to be, really impactful moments, and there's going to be less impactful moments, and there's going to be moments that don't seem to be that impactful until you look back at them and say, "Oh, wow, that was huge." And
Yeah.
with change, it can sometimes be as easy as saying, "Okay, I'm making this change," and boom, right? But a majority of the time, it's no, I want to make one good decision right now. And that one good decision leads to another good decision, leads to another good decision. Like with the running thing, I hadn't even started running until 27 months ago, right? Which sounds like a big number when you say it out loud, but in the grand scheme of athletics, that's not very long. And in under 2 years of running, I went from not running at all in over a decade to completing a 100-mile ultra marathon. And it's not done just, oh, okay, I want to decide to run 100 miles, right? That was never my goal until 3 months before when I started training for it. But you make those little improvements, little improvements, and before you know it, you're looking back and saying, holy shit, how the hell did I get here?
Absolutely. And I want to also switch a little bit to your experience with psilocybin. So it's pretty easy to categorize it in just the general category of drugs and generally bad for you kind of things. But your experience with it was significant because it helped you sort of come to terms with things and realize some things about your past that gave you peace and a way to move forward in a new and healthy way. So share a little bit about that experience with psilocybin and how it continued to help push you on the right path.
Yeah. For me, when I had my realizations and my life-changing experience on psilocybin, it started as a recreational thing, and I wouldn't say unaware of all the therapeutic benefits of it. And so it started out as a recreational experience where I, was planning on going to a music festival and wanted to see how it felt before going to the music festival. I had eaten mushrooms one time before when I was 18 and had a, just by all accounts, a horrendous experience because I wasn't in the right state of mind going into it and set your mindset going into it and you're setting the physical location and the people around you. You want to optimize that to the best of your ability before trying any sort of psychedelic, and I had not done either of those things and had a terrible experience. But anyway, fast forward 10 years later, and I'm 29 and I'm blacking out on a regular basis and I'm doing coke more days than I'm not doing coke, and I'm on SSRIs and I'm addicted to porn and chewing tobacco and yada yada yada. I try psilocybin, and a month later, none of those things are true anymore. I stopped binge drinking completely. I gave up coke on the spot, stopped chewing tobacco. I stopped watching porn, going to strip clubs, gambling, you know, essentially any bad habit that I had, I could choose to be better. And that's really the magic of psilocybin, is that it helps you to rewrite the neural pathways for yourself and choose how you actually want to live life, not just follow the molding that you followed for the preceding years of your life.
I mean, that's really incredible, that it it gave you, as you said, the choice to stop these bad vices that would for sure have killed you sooner, more likely than later, right? And put you on a path where you are in control. As I like to think, your inside values match your outside actions and what you're doing and what feels right. And so the fact that you're able to just say, you know what, alcohol, drugs, porn, strip clubs, none of this is what really feels good to you, like actually it feels right, and then you can kind of push that aside and then tell us how you got started on the journey of running. I mean, first of all, an ultra marathon is no joke, and 100 miles. Oof. So it's really, really impressive. How did you get started on that part?
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. I appreciate the acknowledgement. But yeah, so essentially, what happened was is that my whole life I've been an athlete, right? I fell in love with pushing myself physically at a young age, and never never really had days off from lifting. When I found psilocybin, the thing that, it brings you hyper awareness of everything, right? And I was now hyper aware that my obsessive lifting left my body at a point where I was really strong, yes, but I couldn't really move very well. And so I had to do a lot of things to rewrite how my body moved. So I got really big into stretching. I, I got into doing all these little things that I'd pushed off for the longest time, and that was part of my life reformation. And one of those was fixing my bike. And so I started riding my bike for the first time. And it started out with, a mile ride, a 2 mile ride. And then, I remember texting one of my friends who does like, professional level biking. Hey, dude, I just rode 8 miles. Like, wow, that's incredible. And, like to think that I go from that, which was in probably like June of 2024, or 23, I guess. Yeah, 23. Um, to then later that year, realizing that I wanted to do a Spartan race, which was something that I had, floated the idea with friends a number of times and floated the idea to a couple other friends this time. But 2 weeks before the race, I realized that nobody else was going to sign up. And so I had a question for myself, was that, did I want to continue the codependency that had been a burden to me for so long, or did I want to do something for myself finally? And despite having not run in 12 years, since I was a freshman in college, said, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to sign up for the half marathon Spartan race because if there's people out there that do it, I can figure out a way to get to the finish line. So I signed up for that half marathon Spartan with, uh, 16 days to prepare, and went out there and pushed myself to an extreme that I wouldn't say if I didn't know that I had, but it had been a really long time since I squeezed that level of exertion out of myself. And it just kind of lit this fire of, wanting to continually chase that new level of, okay, I did that. That's possible for me. Now, what else is possible? And, I did a triathlon a few months after that. And then the next summer, so 9 months after I started running, my friend hits me up and was like, "Hey, dude, I just signed up for this race on Saturday. You want to do it?" And me, confused, asks what kind of race. And he lets me know it's a 46-mile ultra marathon with zero preparation, running 15 miles a week or something like that. The longest run I had done was that half marathon back 9 months prior, but said fuck it, and I showed up on race day, and the saying, "How do you eat an elephant?" came to me. Do you know that answer?
No, what is it?
One bite at a time, Kristen. An elephant, one bite at a time. So that
Make
came to me as I was headed to the start line, and I knew that it would be a huge fucking elephant, but that if I could just continue to take one little bite after one little bite after one little bite, that I'd make it to the finish line eventually. And man, it was so exhausting, painful. I hadn't quite figured out running stride and mechanics yet and everything like that. So it was really just grit that got me to that finish line, but I did. And you know. Started challenging myself in more ways, strongman competitions last year, and then decided I really wanted to hit the ultra marathon thing hard. So I signed up for a 100-mile race and really trained leading up to that. So, no longer just, okay, I'll just show up on race day and see what happens, but actually training for it. And in that 100-mile race, I finished in sixth place overall out of 77 people. I finished in under 24 hours, 23 hours flat, which is a huge benchmark in the ultra marathon world, is completing in under 24 hours. And then 2 weeks ago, I actually won my first race. So,
Congratulations.
progress. Yeah, thank you.
Amazing. Wow, John, you've had really an incredible journey, and we're winding down now, but I've got one last question for you. So you went from blackout weekends to finishing a 100-mile ultra marathon. What does pushing yourself physically give you that your old life never could?
Well, you asked me that at the beginning, to kind of prep me, and so my mind immediately went to purpose, right? And I think that that's a really major thing is that with the right there's a quote with the right why you can figure out any how. And that's exactly what it comes down to is that I had this experience with psilocybin that just showed me that I had so much potential to make my life better and to use my life to provide value to other people. And so that's why I got into personal training. That's why I wanted to write my book, was to show people what is possible with these things that have been vilified for so long, that are still a Schedule One drug, right? Is that there's so much potential positive to be gained. And that's why I do the running, right? That's why I challenge myself in this way, to show people that you can go from being blackout drunk to completing things that blow your own mind. And all it takes is a little bit of self belief and autonomy and conviction. And you can get there. Mushrooms don't
Yeah.
do it yourself, but they can help change your mind. And, I hope to be a part of that for people.
So beautiful. John, thank you for your honesty. Thank you for sharing the messy parts and the breakthrough moments. And especially thank you for reminding us that transformation does not start with perfection, it starts with ownership. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your story with all of us today. If today's conversation sparked something in you, take a moment to sit with it. You can find more episodes and resources at flyingupstreampodcast.com. And if this show speaks to you, the best way to support it is to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who is ready to question the path they are on. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and always keep flying upstream.